at my daughter-in-law's lavish 40th birthday dinner, surrounded by 40 country club guests sipping vintage champagne, she tapped her crystal flute with a dessert spoon and smiled directly into the room. She announced that starting Monday morning at 9 o'clock, I was being transitioned to the Oakridge Memory Care Pavilion, so my private garden suite could be remodeled into an influencer Pilates studio and luxury wine cellar. My son Gregory stood beside her under the grand chandelier, nodding in silence and looking at his leather shoes, while our neighbors politely clapped for what they called an act of boundless family devotion. They thought a 64-year-old retired hospital compliance auditor would sit quietly to avoid making a public scene. They forgot that 4 years ago, I saved their custom estate from bank foreclosure with a $420,000 cash wire. And they completely forgot that the recorded Master Promissory Note in safe deposit box 884 contained an immediate 48-hour default acceleration clause. The courtyard chandeliers cast a warm golden glow across 30 yards of polished flagstone. Caterers in black vests glided between linen-draped tables, pouring $300 Napa Cabernet into crystal stems. I sat at table 2, wearing my pressed navy silk blouse and the silver pearl brooch my late husband Robert gave me for our 30th anniversary. To my left sat Dr. Harrison, a retired cardiologist from Forsyth Medical Center. To my right sat Clara, my 16-year-old granddaughter, whose fingers were lightly fidgeting with her cloth napkin. Courtney stood at the center of the terrace beneath the white floral arch. Her diamond bracelet caught the halogen spotlights as she tapped her flute for the second time. The low hum of laughter and silverware ceased instantly across the 40 guests. Friends, family, colleagues. Courtney began, her voice carrying that practiced, melodic warmth she used for her 100,000 online followers. Tonight is about gratitude. As Gregory and I expand Meadowbrook Lifestyle Media into national syndication, we have realized that true leadership begins at home. She turned her gaze toward table 2, resting her eyes upon me with a soft, rehearsed smile. For 4 years, Gregory's mother Evelyn has been our quiet anchor. Courtney continued smoothly into the wireless microphone. But as many of you know, our elder loved ones eventually reach a season where home maintenance and independent living become an unfair burden. We love Mom too much to let her worry about meals, medication, or isolation. A quiet murmur of approval rippled through the older country club couples at the surrounding tables. That is why, as our special gift of family devotion, Courtney announced with a triumphant beam, Gregory and I have secured a private executive suite for Evelyn at the prestigious Oakridge Senior Care Pavilion, beginning this Monday at 9 sharp. Beside me, Clara's breath caught in her throat. The teenager turned her head toward me, her eyes wide with shock. "Grandma," Clara whispered, her voice trembling beneath the polite applause. "She didn't tell you, did she?" I placed my hand gently over Clara's cold fingers. "Breathe, sweetheart," I whispered back in an even tone. "Just breathe." Across the flagstone terrace, Gregory raised his champagne glass to join the toast. He was 38 years old, 6 feet tall, dressed in a custom-tailored Italian suit that my savings account had helped finance. He looked everywhere except directly at my eyes. He looked at the floral centerpieces. He looked at his business partners from Charlotte. He looked at the imported Italian patio pavers. And while Mom enjoys the world-class spa amenities and round-the-clock wellness staff at Oakridge, Courtney added, gesturing with an open palm toward the brick wing behind the hydrangeas, we will be transforming the East Wing into the Meadowbrook Creator Studio and Pilates Loft, a dedicated space for our growing digital brand. The guests broke into enthusiastic applause. Several women at table 3 dabbed the corners of their eyes with monogrammed napkins, whispering about what an extraordinarily selfless daughter-in-law Courtney was. I did not flinch. I did not knock over my water goblet. I did not raise my voice to shout across 40 strangers. For 34 years, I served as the Director of Regulatory Compliance and Forensic Auditing for the regional hospital system. When you spend 3 decades auditing corporate medical fraud, insurance kickbacks, and forged physician charts, you learn one fundamental truth about human predators. The louder they stage their moral virtue, the closer they are to committing a felony. I looked down at the gold wristwatch on my left wrist. The hands pointed precisely to 7:42 in the evening. I lifted my glass of sparkling water, took one calm sip, and set it back on the linen tablecloth without making a single sound. In the autumn of 2022, 4 years before this birthday dinner, Gregory stood on the back porch of my small debt-free brick townhouse in Buena Vista. It was raining, and my son was sobbing so hard his shoulders shook against the brick siding. He and Courtney had built their 7,000-square-foot dream manor in the gated enclave of Meadowbrook Reserve. Courtney had insisted on 14-foot ceilings, imported French limestone flooring, and a 6-figure commercial kitchen for her culinary video productions. They had taken out an adjustable-rate construction loan through First Piedmont Bank, assuming their influencer sponsorships and Gregory's logistics salary would effortlessly cover the $8,000 monthly payments. Then the market shifted. Interest rates climbed, Courtney's staging clients dried up during the winter quarter, and the bank issued a formal 30-day notice of default and foreclosure. They were 14 business days away from having an auction banner planted on their front lawn. Gregory sat at my kitchen table, drinking black coffee from the mug his father Robert had used for 20 years before cancer took him. "Mom," Gregory had choked out, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand, "if we lose Meadowbrook, Courtney will leave me. The bank is demanding $420,000 in cash by Friday to cure the default." I was 60 years old then. My townhouse was completely paid off. I had Robert's life insurance proceeds and my own carefully guarded hospital pension reserves sitting in low-risk treasury bonds. I looked at my only child. I remembered teaching him how to ride a bicycle on the gravel lane behind our old farm. "I will help you, Gregory," I told him quietly across the kitchen table, "on one condition that will never be altered." "Anything, Mom," he promised instantly, grabbing my hands with frantic gratitude. "Name it. I will sell my townhouse and wire the full $420,000 cash balance directly to First Piedmont Bank to extinguish the default," I explained calmly. "In exchange, the builder will construct a private, self-contained 800-square-foot garden suite on the east wing of the manor. It will have its own private entrance, its own patio, and its own kitchen. I will live there in peace for the remainder of my days." "That was always the plan, Mom," Gregory exclaimed with genuine tears in his eyes. "You'll have your own sanctuary right next to Clara. You'll never have to worry about a roof over your head again." The following morning, I walked into the downtown legal offices of Frank DeWitt. Frank had been my late husband's closest friend since their undergraduate days at Chapel Hill, and for 40 years he had handled commercial real estate and estate planning for Forsyth County's oldest families. Frank listened to Gregory's situation, took off his wire-rimmed spectacles, and placed both palms flat on his mahogany desk. "Evelyn," Frank said with grave affection, "you are a mother and your heart wants to save your boy. But Courtney Vance is the daughter of a speculative strip mall developer. If you put $420,000 of cash into that dirt without a steel collar around their necks, they will treat you like a tenant the moment their cash flow tightens." "Then build the collar, Frank," I replied steadily. "Make it out of tempered North Carolina law." And Frank did. On November 14, 2022, in Forsyth County Public Registry Book 3412, page 884, Frank officially recorded the master legal instrument. A first priority master deed of trust and secured promissory note in the amount of $420,000, naming Evelyn Mercer as the senior secured primary lien holder over the entire Meadowbrook parcel. Buried within the 4-page rider was Section 9B, the Elder Tenancy and Non-Displacement Covenant. It stated in unmistakable legal English that Evelyn Mercer held an irrevocable, unencumbered lifetime right of quiet residential occupancy in the East Garden Wing. It further specified that any attempt by the borrowers to displace, relocate, evict, harass, or encumber the senior occupants' living quarters would constitute an immediate and incurable material default. Upon such default, the entire $420,000 principal, alongside a mandatory 10% statutory default penalty and all accrued legal fees, would become instantly due and payable in cash within 48 hours of formal written demand. Gregory signed that promissory note. Courtney signed that deed of trust. They received my cashier's check for $420,000. The foreclosure was dismissed, and I moved into my quiet brick garden suite beneath the weeping willow. In early June, after 30 years of walking hospital corridors, my right knee required a minor outpatient arthroscopic meniscus trim at Wake Forest Baptist. It was a standard 45-minute procedure with a local nerve block. My orthopedist, Dr. Marcus Webb, assured me that with 2 weeks of light physical therapy, I would be walking 3 miles a day without assistance. I spent exactly 1 night in the observation ward. When Gregory picked me up in his black SUV, he was uncharacteristically quiet. He carried my small duffel bag into my garden suite, set it on the entryway bench, and cleared his throat 3 times. "Mom," Gregory said, staring out the window toward the pool, "Courtney and I were talking. Maybe this surgery is a sign." "A sign of what, Gregory?" I asked, sitting in my armchair and resting my leg on the ottoman. "A sign that maintaining 800 square feet is getting too strenuous for you," he mumbled, his voice tight. "You shouldn't be cooking your own soup or washing your own linens. There are facilities in town that handle all of that with 5-star dining." "I am 64 years old, Gregory, not 94. I answered firmly, looking him straight in the eyes. "My heart is strong, my mind is completely clear, and my knee will be fully healed before the summer hydrangeas lose their bloom. I am not leaving my home." Gregory didn't reply. He simply looked down at his watch, muttered that he had an operational call, and walked out through the connecting corridor. 3 days later, while Clara was sitting on my sofa helping me string fresh green beans from the farmer's market, my granddaughter suddenly stopped working. Her eyes were fixed on the polished mahogany nightstand beside my bed. Tucked beneath my reading lamp was a stack of glossy, full-color booklets that I had not placed there. Clara reached over and picked up the top brochure, reading the gold title, "Oakridge Senior Care and Memory Pavilion, Compassionate Living for Declining Loved Ones." Folded inside the brochure was a pricing sheet. In Courtney's distinctive purple fountain pen script, numbers were calculated along the margin. The base memory suite was $6,800 a month. Mom's pension and Social Security totaled $3,200, leaving a net family out-of-pocket balance of $5,000 a month, to be offset by East Wing studio monetization. Clara looked at the paper, then looked at me, her lower lip trembling with indignation. "Grandma," Clara whispered. "She came into your room while you were asleep after your physical therapy on Tuesday. She told Dad that you seemed disoriented because you didn't hear the doorbell ring." "I didn't hear the doorbell, Clara," I said with a faint, quiet smile, "because I had my noise-canceling headphones on while listening to Vivaldi." "She's telling everyone at the tennis club that you're losing your memory, Grandma," Clara confessed, her voice cracking. "She told Mom's interior designer that the East Wing was going to be empty before the August brand launch." I took the glossy brochure from Clara's hands, laid it flat on my desk, and opened my bottom drawer. Inside that drawer lay my blue leather binder, containing my certified medical records from Wake Forest Baptist, my annual cognitive baseline audits, and the duplicate original of the 2022 First Deed of Trust. "Clara," I said softly, looking into my granddaughter's honest eyes, "in the hospital auditing business we have a saying, a lie can travel 3 miles before breakfast, but the ledger always waits at the courthouse door." "What are you going to do, Grandma?" "I am going to let them write their script, sweetheart," I replied, smoothing the edges of my linen tablecloth, "because the higher they build their stage, the further they fall when the curtain drops." As the 40 guests continued to applaud Courtney's public toast out in the courtyard, caterers began serving slices of raspberry almond cake. Courtney stepped down from the terrace platform, surrounded by country club friends who clinked their glasses against hers. "Courtney, you are truly a saint," gushed Brenda Hollister. "Most women would never take on the emotional burden of managing an elder parent's transition." "It's all about unconditional love, Brenda," Courtney replied loudly, projecting her voice toward table 2. "We simply want Mom to have professional structure." I pushed my chair back from table 2. The brass chair legs made a soft, decisive scrape against the flagstone. Dr. Harrison looked up at me with concern. "Evelyn, do you need a hand walking inside?" "No, Harrison," I answered with a warm, steady smile. "My knee is completely healed. In fact, I don't think I have ever walked with greater clarity in my entire life." I walked across the courtyard. As I passed Courtney, she turned toward me, her eyes flashing with nervous tension beneath her thick mascara. "Mom," Courtney said, lowering her voice, "the administrative intake director from Oakridge, Mrs. Gable, will be arriving on Monday at 8:30 in the morning with the transport van. Gregory and I will have your clothes packed in the morning, so you don't have to stress yourself." I looked Courtney dead in her eyes. "Courtney," I said in a quiet, measured voice, "you always were exceptional at organizing parties." "Well, thank you, Mom," she replied with a condescending smirk. "Just make sure," I added softly, "that you save enough champagne for Tuesday morning." She paused, her glass halfway to her lips, a sudden shadow of confusion crossing her brow. I turned and walked through the arched breezeway directly into the main residence. The interior of the 7,000-square-foot manor was silent, save for the muffled jazz quartet playing on the lawn. I walked through the double mahogany doors into the grand kitchen, where overhead pendant lights illuminated the waterfall marble island. Spread across the island were 2 massive rolled sheets of architectural drafting paper from Vance Architectural and Interior Concepts. The project title read, Meadowbrook Manor, East Wing Conversion, High-Yield Digital Studio, Commercial Pilates Sanctuary, and Sommelier Wine Cellar. My garden suite had been completely dissected on paper. My walnut bookcase area was marked, demolish and install floor-to-ceiling mirrored wall and reformer anchors. My quiet reading alcove was labeled, acoustic paneling for video podcast recording and sponsor product display. My kitchen was designated, Sub-Zero Dual Zone 40-bottle wine dispenser and tasting bar. Taped to the blueprint was a formal contractor estimate from Triad Luxury Renovations. Total Phase 1 demolition and framing, $78,400. Deposit paid $15,000, non-refundable. Work scheduled to commence Tuesday, August 12th at 7 in the morning sharp. Beside the blueprints lay an unsealed FedEx envelope addressed to Gregory and Courtney Mercer from First Piedmont Bank's Commercial Lending Division. It was an official loan denial and notice of deficit, dated just 6 business days prior. Application for a $250,000 commercial home equity expansion line, denied. Reason, insufficient debt-to-income ratio, delinquent unsecured revolving credit lines totaling $14,200 past 90 days, and the existence of an unsubordinated first deed of trust recorded in Book 3412, page 884, held by Evelyn Mercer for $420,000. The primary lender noted that no secondary commercial financing could be issued without full formal subordination or total discharge of the senior lien holder's interest. I opened the adjacent drawer beneath the island. Lying inside was the official intake packet for Oakridge Senior Living. On page 7, the authorization for direct benefit transfer and guardianship guarantee was my forged signature, Evelyn Mercer. Beside it was my son's signature, Gregory Mercer, financial guarantor and conservator. They had already pledged my monthly hospital pension check of $3,200 directly to Oakridge to cover the entry deposit. I pulled my smartphone from my silk pocket and took high-resolution, glare-free photographs of every page, the blueprints, the contractor agreement, the bank loan denial, and the forged intake application. Then I closed the drawer and walked down the quiet corridor to my garden suite. At 10:15 that night, the last country club guest drove away through the gates of Meadowbrook Reserve. I sat in my high-backed armchair beside the garden window, sipping a cup of chamomile tea in the darkened room, illuminated only by the amber glow of my reading lamp. A sharp knock sounded at my interior hallway door. Without waiting, Gregory stepped into my living room, carrying a half-empty glass of sparkling water, his bow tie undone. "Mom," Gregory said with an exhausted sigh, "Courtney told me you gave her a strange look outside." I looked at him calmly over the rim of my teacup. "I gave her an accurate look, Gregory," I replied evenly. Gregory paced across the hardwood floor toward my bookcase. "Mom, you have to understand the pressure we are under," he began defensively. "Courtney has brand partners coming from New York next month. Her digital agency evaluated the property. They said having an elderly relative living in the primary east wing makes the estate look like an assisted living hospice instead of a luxury influencer retreat. So your solution," I stated plainly, "was to announce to 40 strangers over champagne that I am losing my mind and being institutionalized on Monday morning?" Gregory flinched. His cheeks flushed crimson. "Nobody said you were losing your mind, Mom," he snapped. "Oakridge is a 5-star luxury facility. We are paying $5,000 a month out of our own pocket to give you the highest standard of elder care." "You aren't paying $5,000, Gregory," I answered in a quiet, chilling tone. "You forged my signature on the intake dossier to steal my $3,200 monthly pension, and you applied for a $250,000 equity loan to demolish my bedroom for a wine cellar." Gregory froze in the middle of the room. His glass tilted slightly, water spilling onto the oak floorboards. His eyes widened in sheer panic. You went through our papers," he stammered. "I didn't go through your papers, Gregory," I replied, setting my teacup on the saucer without a rattle. "I conducted a forensic audit of an active conspiracy inside my own home." "Mom, please." Gregory stepped toward me, his hands shaking. "The loan is just a bridge financing. Once Courtney's online course launches in November, we'll pay back every single dime. If you make a scene on Monday when the Oakridge transport arrives, you will destroy everything Courtney and I have worked 4 years to build." I stood up from my armchair. Though I was 5 feet 4 inches tall and 64 years old, I looked at my 6-foot son with unyielding authority. "You calculated the cost of your vanity, Gregory." I paused, letting the silence settle into the room like heavy winter frost. "But you forgot who signed the mortgage." Gregory stared at me, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. "Go to bed, Gregory," I said calmly, turning toward the dark rose garden, "and make sure Courtney sets her alarm early on Monday." At 7:30 on Sunday morning, while the main residence was still asleep, I walked out my garden door carrying my small leather briefcase. Clara was waiting by the mailbox in her faded denim jacket, holding her violin case. "Grandma," Clara said softly, "I'm coming with you." "I know you are, sweetheart," I replied, taking her hand. We drove to the brick colonial law offices of Frank DeWitt on Main Street, arriving at precisely 8 o'clock. Frank was already inside, wearing his Sunday tweed jacket, a fresh pot of dark roast coffee steaming on the credenza. I opened my leather briefcase and laid my smartphone flat on Frank's desk alongside my certified duplicate copy of the 2022 First Deed of Trust. For 25 minutes, Frank scrolled slowly through the high-resolution photographs, the demolition blueprints, the contractor agreement, the bank loan rejection citing my senior lien, and the forged Oakridge intake application. When Frank reached the final document, he took off his reading glasses and leaned back in his leather chair with a dangerous smile. "Evelyn," Frank said in a low, gravelly voice, "in 41 years of practicing property law in North Carolina, I have seen sons take their fathers' tractors, and I have seen daughters steal their mother's silver tea sets. But I have rarely seen two arrogant social climbers walk themselves so cleanly into an iron bear trap." "Explain the mechanics, Frank," I said calmly. "Give me the exact ledger." Frank pulled a legal yellow notepad toward him and began writing. First, Courtney's public declaration in front of 40 witnesses, combined with the contractor demolition agreement scheduled for Tuesday morning, constitutes an undeniable material breach of Section 9B of the Master Deed of Trust, the Elder Tenancy and Non-Displacement Covenant. Second, the forged intake application to Oakridge constitutes criminal elder exploitation and identity fraud under North Carolina General Statute Section 14112. Third, because Section 9B contains an automatic acceleration clause upon material breach, you are legally entitled to demand the immediate payoff of the entire $420,000 principal balance within 48 hours. And if they cannot produce $420,000 in certified funds by Tuesday afternoon at 5 o'clock? I asked. Then on Wednesday morning at 9 sharp, Frank answered. I file a formal petition for foreclosure and a recorded notice of lease pendens in Forsyth County Superior Court. The entire Meadowbrook Reserve estate goes to the courthouse auction block, and you get paid every single penny before Gregory, Courtney, or their secondary creditors see one wooden nickel. Draft the instruments, Frank, I instructed softly, and have the county process server ready by 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Monday morning broke across Winston-Salem with clear summer sunshine. At 8:25 in the morning, a white Mercedes van bearing the purple logo of Oakridge Senior Living and Memory Care pulled through the gates of Meadowbrook Reserve. 2 minutes later, an 8-man moving crew from Triad Prestige Relocations arrived in a 26-foot box truck, backing up toward my garden suite patio to clear my furniture for the demolition crew. Courtney stepped out onto the front portico wearing a designer cream jumpsuit and oversized sunglasses, clipboard in hand. "Good morning, boys," Courtney called out with performative brightness. The grandmother's personal items in the East Wing are to be packed into standard boxes for the Oakridge van. All the heavywood furniture, the antique armoire and walnut bookcase, can be moved to the curb for estate liquidation. "Excuse me, ma'am," the moving foreman asked. "Is the owner inside to supervise fragile items?" "Oh, don't worry about her," Courtney waved dismissively. "She's being transitioned to assisted memory care this morning. Her son and I have full administrative authority over the premises." Just as the moving crew reached for their hand trucks, a marked Forsyth County Sheriff's Patrol cruiser pulled smoothly into the motor court, followed by a dark blue sedan. Deputy Sheriff Miller, a 6'2" veteran officer, stepped out onto the asphalt. Beside him stepped James Lawson, a licensed senior process server carrying a thick, bright orange legal folder. Courtney froze on the portico steps, lowering her sunglasses. "Officer," Courtney called out, her voice faltering. "Is there an issue with parking on the private lane? We have a moving permit." Deputy Miller walked up the stone steps. "Ma'am, are you Courtney Vance Mercer?" "Yes, I am," she answered, trying to regain her posture. James Lawson stepped forward, pulled 3 stapled documents from the orange folder, and extended them directly into Courtney's manicured hands. "Mrs. Mercer," Lawson announced clearly in front of the 8 moving men and the 2 Oakridge nurses, "you and Mr. Gregory Mercer are hereby formally served with a notice of material default, immediate acceleration demand, and formal trespass warning from the law offices of Frank DeWitt on behalf of senior secured lien holder Evelyn Mercer." Courtney looked down at the bright red legal stamp across the front page. "Notice of imminent foreclosure and demand for payment. $480,400. What? What is this?" Courtney shrieked, her voice losing all polished elegance. "We own this house. Evelyn is an elderly dependent who lives in our in-law suite." At that exact moment, my garden suite door clicked open. I walked out onto the stone patio, dressed in my tailored charcoal pantsuit, carrying my handbag, with Clara standing proudly beside me holding my briefcase. The 2 Oakridge intake nurses turned toward me. "Good morning, ladies," I said pleasantly. "I believe you were sent here by Mrs. Mercer under the fraudulent representation that I am a disoriented memory care candidate in need of institutionalization." I handed the lead nurse a certified document stamped with the official seal of Wake Forest Baptist Health. "This is my comprehensive neurological evaluation completed on Friday by Dr. Arthur Vance, Chief of Geriatric Medicine. It certifies 100% physical and cognitive autonomy. Furthermore, the intake application in your clipboard contains a forged signature executed without my knowledge or consent." The lead nurse scanned the certified letter, looked at Courtney's pale face, and closed her clipboard with a loud snap. "Pack the van, Sarah," the nurse told her colleague sternly. "We are leaving immediately, and I will be filing a formal incident report with our corporate compliance director regarding third-party intake fraud." The Oakridge van started its engine, backed out of the driveway, and disappeared through the iron gates. Courtney stood frozen on the steps, clutching the 40-page default demand against her chest. "Gregory!" Courtney screamed at the top of her lungs. "Gregory, get out here right now." Gregory stumbled out onto the porch in his socks, holding a coffee cup, his face pale as chalk. "Courtney, what is going on?" he stammered. "Your mother just served us with a foreclosure notice for nearly $500,000. Courtney shrieked. "Tell the deputy this is our house." Deputy Miller turned to Gregory, his expression stern. "Mr. Mercer," Deputy Miller stated, "under Section 9B of the Recorded First Deed of Trust, your mother is the senior primary lien holder with exclusive right of quiet occupancy. Furthermore, this formal legal notice prohibits any unauthorized entry, demolition, or removal of personal property from the East Wing. If a single contractor swings a hammer here tomorrow, it will be treated as criminal trespass and contempt of court. You have 48 hours to cure the default, or the sheriff's department will execute a formal notice of sale." The moving foreman looked at his crew and waved his hand. "Pack the truck, guys. We're out of here." Gregory looked down at the orange document in his hands. Original principal, $420,000. 10% statutory default penalty, $42,000. Accrued legal fees, $18,400. Total due by Wednesday at 5 in the afternoon, $480,400 in certified funds. Gregory dropped his coffee mug. The ceramic shattered across the French limestone porch, dark coffee splashing across his white socks. He looked across the driveway at me, his eyes filled with sheer terror. "Mom!" he choked out, his voice barely a whisper. "Where are we supposed to get $500,000 by Wednesday?" I looked at my son with calm sorrow. "You should have thought about that, Gregory," I replied softly, "before you raised a champagne glass to toast my eviction." The emergency summit took place at 2 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon in the 10th floor executive boardroom of First Piedmont Bank in downtown Winston-Salem. Sitting on one side of the 30-foot walnut conference table were Gregory, Courtney, and Courtney's father, Donald Vance, a 65-year-old strip mall developer who had arrived in an expensive Mercedes, slamming his gold cufflinks onto the table. Sitting on the other side were Frank DeWitt, Clara, and myself. At the head of the table sat Marcus Thorne, Senior Vice President of Commercial Real Estate Lending for First Piedmont Bank. "This is an absolute shakedown," Donald Vance roared, pointing a sun-spotted finger at Frank. "My daughter and son-in-law own a premier 7,000-square-foot luxury estate in Meadowbrook Reserve. It was appraised at $980,000 last year. You cannot foreclose on $1 million property over an internal family disagreement about an in-law suite." Frank DeWitt slowly adjusted his reading glasses and leaned forward. "Mr. Vance," Frank said with razor-sharp precision, "this is not an internal family disagreement. This is a legally recorded senior first deed of trust executed in Book 3412, page 884 of the Forsyth County Registry." Frank slid the certified county title abstract across the table to Vice President Thorne. "When Mrs. Evelyn Mercer wired $420,000 in cash in 2022 to save your daughter from foreclosure," Frank continued, "she did not make an unsecured gift. She took a senior, non-subordinated first mortgage lien over the entire parcel." Donald Vance scoffed loudly. "Then we'll just refinance the property. First Piedmont can issue a second mortgage, pay off Evelyn's principal, and we'll kick her off the title." Vice President Thorne picked up the title abstract and shook his head with a grim sigh. "Mr. Vance," Thorne interjected professionally, "First Piedmont Bank cannot issue a secondary mortgage on this property. Under North Carolina law, a property subject to an active material default and an imminent notice of lease pendens has a clouded title. No commercial underwriter in the United States will touch this parcel." Courtney gasped, grabbing her father's arm. "Dad, write the check. You have the commercial development account. Just pay her off so we can keep the house." Donald Vance's face turned an ugly shade of purple. He looked down at his diamond watch, then looked at his daughter with bitter, hard eyes. "Courtney," Donald growled through clenched teeth, "I have 3 commercial strip malls sitting 70% vacant on Highway 52, and my construction lines are maxed out. I don't have $480,000 in liquid cash to bail out your influencer fantasy." The room went completely silent. Courtney's jaw dropped. The foundation of her entire social existence collapsed into dust right in front of her peers. She turned to Gregory, her voice shrill with panic. "Gregory, do something. Call your corporate office in Charlotte. Ask for an executive salary advance." Gregory sat slumped in his leather chair, staring at the table, his hands trembling in his lap. "There is no advance, Courtney," Gregory whispered brokenly. "I took a $40,000 loan against my company 401k 6 months ago to pay for your birthday gala and the pool pavers. If corporate finds out about this foreclosure filing, I will be terminated for financial non-disclosure by Friday." I looked across the table at the 2 people who, 48 hours earlier, had toasted my removal with crystal flutes. "Mr. Thorne," I spoke up, my voice clear and serene. Every head turned toward me. As senior secured lien holder, I stated, I have no desire to see this property sit in a prolonged foreclosure auction on the courthouse steps, dragging my granddaughter's name through local public notices. Courtney looked up with desperate hope. Mom, you'll forgive the note? No, Courtney, I replied, looking at her with unyielding resolve. Forgiveness is for the soul. The ledger demands payment in full. I looked at Frank DeWitt, who slid the final settlement and quitclaim partition agreement across the table. Here are the non-negotiable terms, I announced. First, the Meadowbrook Reserve estate will be listed immediately for an expedited, court-supervised cash sale at $980,000. Second, from the gross closing proceeds, my full $420,000 principal, alongside $42,000 in statutory default interest and $18,000 in legal costs, totaling exactly $480,000, will be wired directly into my personal escrow account. Third, Gregory and Courtney will sign a full irrevocable quitclaim deed, surrendering all claims to the property, the East Wing, and my personal retirement assets. Fourth, any remaining equity after paying off closing costs, broker commissions, and delinquent contractor liens will be divided between Gregory and Courtney to settle their personal debts. I looked directly into my son's haunted eyes. You have until 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon to sign this agreement, Gregory. If it is not signed by 5 o'clock, Frank files the foreclosure petition, the sheriff posts the sale notice on the gates of Meadowbrook Reserve, and you will leave that house with nothing. Donald Vance grabbed his briefcase, stood up without saying goodbye to his daughter, and walked out of the boardroom, letting the heavy door slam shut behind him. Courtney buried her face in her hands and began to sob uncontrollably. Gregory reached for Frank's gold fountain pen with a shaking hand. Where do I sign, Mom? Gregory choked out, tears spilling onto the legal parchment. Right on the line, Gregory, I replied softly. The line where truth begins. 6 weeks later, the summer heat broke over the North Carolina Piedmont, giving way to the crisp air of early autumn. The Meadowbrook Reserve estate sold to a corporate executive relocating from New York for $975,000 in cash. After the closing attorney settled the title, Frank DeWitt wired $480,000 directly into my private account at Wells Fargo. The remaining proceeds were completely consumed by First Piedmont Bank's underlying $380,000 construction balance, the $78,000 contractor cancellation penalty, broker commissions, and $14,000 in delinquent credit card settlements. With zero equity left to their names, Gregory and Courtney were forced to downsize into a modest, 2-bedroom rented apartment near the commercial bypass in Greensboro. Courtney's influencer page went dark, her brand sponsorships vanished, and Gregory took a secondary consulting job working 60 hours a week to rebuild his credit. I did not move into an assisted living facility. I used a portion of my recovered funds to purchase a beautiful, sunlit 1920s craftsman cottage on Church Street, in the heart of historic Old Salem. The cottage featured original heart pine floors, 2 working brick fireplaces, a wide front porch with a wooden swing, and a half-acre garden filled with heirloom roses, fig trees, and flowering dogwoods. I placed $200,000 into an irrevocable, fully protected educational and conservatory trust for Clara, ensuring that my granddaughter's college tuition and master violin studies at the Juilliard School would be permanently secured, entirely beyond the reach of her parents' financial vanity. On this quiet Sunday evening in late September, the sun was setting behind the Moravian church spires, painting the sky in violet, amber, and gold. I sat on my front porch swing, holding a warm porcelain cup of Earl Grey tea, watching the autumn leaves drift across the brick pathway. From the open French doors of the parlor behind me came the rich, Soaring melody of Johann Sebastian Bach's Partita No. 2 in D minor, played on Clara's violin with breathtaking passion and precision. Clara paused, lowered her bow, and stepped out onto the porch with a bright, joyful smile. "How did that sound, Grandma?" she asked, leaning against the white porch railing. I looked at my granddaughter, at her honest eyes, her pure heart, and the unshakable peace that filled our home. "It sounded like freedom, sweetheart," I replied with a warm, quiet smile. It sounded exactly like freedom. When family members treat their aging parents like inconvenient furniture to be liquidated for social vanity, they often make the fatal mistake of confusing patience with weakness. They forget that the same hands that built their foundation still know how to read the blueprint. If your own children attempted to discard you into an institution to seize your living space, would you quietly accept their verdict to keep the peace? Or would you pull out the Master Promissory Note and hold them legally accountable? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to Broken Bonds for more stories of truth, resilience, and family justice, and share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that dignity is never for sale.